is Valley News Live at 6.
We all need to be careful as high winds and dry conditions continue throughout North Dakota and Minnesota. Whether it's grilling or a bonfire, fire officials are reminding you to use your head over this Easter weekend. And as Valley News Team's crime and safety reporter Bailey Hurley learned today, you could be fined if you're caught violating local burn bans.
Despite the dry and windy weather, the Moorhead Fire Department says thankfully it hasn't caused any fires this week for them. And they're hoping it stays that way as the conditions not only make it easier for fires to start, but also make it more difficult for crews to put the flames out.
We're not flooding, which is great, but with all the dry conditions and
We appear to have lost that story, and we hope to recover it and play it later in this particular newscast. Meanwhile, officials say that fire officials are not seeking out violators of the burn restrictions, but they say they will respond to comments. About 3,000 acres burned near Medora after a fallen power line sparked a wildfire yesterday. Last night, the damage estimate was much larger, but was revised after fire officials got a better view of how much it burned. Much of the scorched land was used by ranchers for grazing. One rancher said he lost close to half of his summer grass.
I don't know what I'm going to do yet, address that problem. It was already so dry, I was short of grass, and these a couple of these pastures I saved, I never even used. Those were my best pastures, and that's where I was going to go.
No injuries were reported and there was no damage to structures. At last check, the fire was 50% contained. We are set to get an update tonight around 8 o'clock. Crews are continuing to monitor the area for any hot spots. Of the most population destinations in North Dakota, the Medora Musical. Thankfully, the stage and most other structures in that area were spared by flames, but for some, it was too close for comfort. When the sun rose, smoke was lingering and the ground was still hot. But the stage did survive. Even with minor damage that'll need to be fixed to that landscaping, the foundation said that they plan on having a full schedule this summer. Here at home, the wind has been relentless. The good news, it's supposed to be easing. Summer is here now with details on when. Summer?
Yeah, Mike, you could see on that sky cam from the Dakota Magic Casino Network, those flags were still blowing in the breeze where we still do have breezy conditions and a fire weather warning. That red flag warning does continue for a couple more hours until 8 p.m. for these red shaded counties. It does exclude some of our counties down across southeastern North Dakota, but the entire region is dry. Extreme drought conditions persist for much of western North Dakota, shaded in red. Severe drought for the orange, the lighter tan, moderate drought conditions, but overall very dry ground and very dry air as well. Take a look at our current humidities, only 15% in Jamestown, 13% in Grand Forks, 18% in Valley City, combined with those winds still gusting out of the northwest at 30 miles per hour in Devil's Lake. Last gust out of the north in Jamestown to 28 miles per hour, 26 miles per hour in Valley City, the latest gust. But the rest of the area, we have seen subsiding breeze, and that will continue through the rest of the evening, Mike. But stay tuned. I'll let you know if the lesser winds will continue through the weekend and just how warm we'll be.
All right, thanks so much. We've repaired those technical difficulties now on that lead story from Valley News Team's Bailey Hurley. She's reporting tonight on what we all need to do to prevent any troubles this weekend.
Despite the dry and windy weather, the Moorhead Fire Department says thankfully it hasn't caused any fires this week for them. And they're hoping it stays that way as the conditions not only make it easier for fires to start, but also make it more difficult for crews to put the flames out.
we're not flooding, which is great, but with all the dry conditions and the wind that we've had, it has just really made that perfect storm for a fire to happen.
Cross says Moorhead is currently not issuing any burn permits, meaning if you're wanting to torch any branches or piles of leaves, it'll have to wait. Adding, if you're caught burning, you could find yourself with a $100 fine.
Should we identify an unsafe fire, we'll simply ask the homeowners or the residents to put the fire out. If we have to come back or if they're not cooperating with us, then we can impose a fine, but that would be a last resort for us.
However, Cross says you can still grill or gather around the bonfire this weekend, with some exceptions.
If the wind is greater than 10 miles per hour, they are not allowed to do any burning at that time.
Cross says to keep your grills and fires further from your homes and decks than normal, and if possible, to keep the flames on concrete. Adding to have a garden hose or fire extinguisher on standby, because in these conditions, it doesn't take much for something small to get out of hand. In Moorhead, Bailey Hurley, Valley News Live.
Cross adds that fire officials are not seeking out violators of the burn restrictions, but says that they will respond to complaints. In other news tonight, 2 men who were wanted in connection to a West Fargo shooting are now in custody. Jamond Walker was arrested in Hibbing, Minnesota, and Leotis McGee Jr. was arrested in Minneapolis. Both are awaiting extradition to North Dakota. The West Fargo shooting happened on March 21st in the 1500 block of 11th Avenue East. A 12-year-old boy suffered a gunshot to the leg. 2 other men were arrested earlier in connection with that shooting. A North Dakota National Guardsman has been found guilty of sexually assaulting a subordinate. The victim said she and other members from her work group went out on November 7th of 2019. She said she didn't drink because she was underage. The victim said Eric Clemenson asked her if he could sleep on her couch because he was too intoxicated to drive. When they got back to her place, he began to touch her inappropriately, then raped her. Clemenson faces up to 10 years in prison. A Crookston man is in jail tonight accused of driving away from police. The officers saying he tried to pull over Ruben Silva yesterday near the intersection of North Main Street and West 3rd Street. Silva took off, driving the wrong way down Main Street. That vehicle was later found near the intersection of Summit Avenue and Riverside Avenue. Silva was later found a short time later near the river. A judge has ruled that a lawsuit against the Minnesota Department of Corrections can proceed. The American Civil Liberties Union of Minnesota filed the lawsuit over the department's handling of the pandemic. It alleges that just 1/5 of the state's 7,600 inmates have been fully vaccinated. The judge ruled that all Minnesota inmates could be included in a class action suit and that Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and the Department of Health Commissioner can be added as defendants. The judge will decide if the inmate vaccination effort violated state law. Clay County is reporting an increase in the COVID-19 cases over the last 2 weeks. Becky Schmidt with Public Health says the uptick is a good reminder that although we are steadily vaccinating individuals in our community, there are still many that are not yet immune to this virus. The public is urged to limit the number of people you gather with, continue to follow social distancing guidelines, wear a face mask, stay home when you're sick, and get tested if you are sick or have been exposed. Now, to sign up to receive notification of vaccine opportunities in Clay County, you can go to our website and click on this story. Meanwhile, Minnesota health leaders say one COVID-19 variant is taking over. 60% of Minnesota's infections are now the variant B.1.1.7, which was first discovered in the United Kingdom. The rise in vaccine allotment and widening of eligibility is a big step forward, but the steady rise in COVID cases feels like a step back. And that's giving a university professor great concern, especially as some states lift mask mandates and loosen restrictions.
We've got a bad virus. We got a lot of people still yet who can be infected despite vaccines arriving. And we are now opening up as if somehow we're done with the virus. It's like we're dismissing gravity.
One indicator to note is cases per 100,000 people. In mid-February, that number was 13.1 in Minnesota. It's up to 23.3 now, a number not seen since the huge surge started last October. And because of the spike in cases, there's more of an urgency to get people vaccinated as quickly as possible. But after 15 million Johnson & Johnson doses spoiled due to a factory error in Baltimore, there's uncertainty about what that will mean in the country's race to beat another surge. Minnesota officials now say the problem shouldn't have had much of an impact in the state.
We're getting our supply from the Netherlands. We're still waiting for confirmation from our CDC colleagues, but our understanding is that that does not affect the supply here.
If you've already had a Johnson & Johnson shot, your dose is not compromised. The Minnesota Director of Infectious Diseases says the state got 30,000 Johnson & Johnson doses this week and expects 80,000 next week. State officials order doses a week ahead. Later on Valley News Live at 6, a shortened, powerful day of testimony focusing on whether the force used against George Floyd was excessive.
And right now in Fargo, we're seeing a little bit of cloud cover out there, but over the next couple of hours, those clouds will be clearing as a cool front passes through. We will also see our winds gradually diminishing and temperatures remaining fairly mild through that midnight hour in the 40s. And very similar trend in Grand Forks. Already seeing those clear skies. Let me look at your Easter weekend forecast just ahead.
This is Valley News Live.